समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
It's been described variously as a geopolitical thunderclap, as America's Suez moment. We'll explain to you what Suez moment means. It's also something that's been put very succinctly in this headline in the Pakistani newspaper, The News. Please see this headline, the screenshot of the paper. It says, Pakistan's military might, Saudi financial heft to redraw Gulf security map. You know what we are talking about. Pakistan and Saudi Arabia have signed a new agreement. This is not yet a treaty, and we don't know if there are any secret annexures. In fact, I would not even have thought of any secret annexures until Zalmay Khalilzad, the former US Special Envoy to Afghanistan and the region, the man who negotiated the disastrous Doha Accords, he put it out in a very disturbed, he's obviously not happy with the development, very disturbed long tweet where he said, are there any secret annexures? We don't know. So he's looking at the possibility of secret annexures, probably because the Doha Accords had secret annexures that he's privy to. That said, we don't have to worry about any secret annexures now because what is there on the record is significant enough. Once again, there is no treaty, there is no detailed agreement with clause this, clause that, etc. Right now, what we have is a statement. Each side, the Pakistani side and the Saudi side, has issued a statement about this long. You can see screenshots on your screen. And this is after a meeting between the Pakistani Prime Minister, Shahbaz Sharif. Obviously, Shahbaz Sharif is always accompanied by his constant chaperone, Asim Munir, Field Marshal Asim Munir. After that, the statements have been issued. The statement has the usual flowery language, but it has one very important expression. It says that the two countries will henceforth, it says they will enhance cooperation in this area and that area, etc. But they say the two countries will see an attack on either country as an attack on both. Now, that is about as explicit a security guarantee that two countries can give each other. In fact, it's not very different. If at all it is different, it is in the sense that it's even more directly worded than Article 5 of NATO. Article 5 of NATO's treaty document says that if any NATO country comes under attack, every other NATO country will see it as an attack on itself, right? These two countries now, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, the richest country in that neighborhood and also the strongest military in that neighborhood. That neighborhood means west of India, between India and Israel. Those two countries have signed this accord, which basically commits each to defending the other in case the other faces aggression. This is a very important event, and the global strategic community is abuzz with it. We see a lot of tweets. There is a lot of excitement on the part of the Pakistanis. There is also, interestingly, a lot of excitement on the part of the Saudis. High Saudi officials, including cabinet ministers, have been tweeting on this, really hailing this as a big breakthrough. So we have to look at a few things. I can take you through history, geography, psychology, philosophy, religiosity, etc., etc. But all of that is not relevant right now. Let's stick to the motives of this agreement and what does this agreement mean. Because to get into that analysis, we will have to first examine where each country's threats come from. As far as Pakistan is concerned, it's very simple. Pakistan, if anything, has clarity, great clarity on this. Its only threat is from India. It has internal threats, maybe in KPK, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, from Baluch rebels, but those are internal insurgencies which armies in our region know how to handle, or at least they think they know how to handle. At least for that, they don't need foreign support. In any case, Saudi Arabia does not have the kind of military that will go and fight for another country. In fact, Saudi Arabia's military, if anything, has greatly struggled to fight for its own country. In 2015, they, if I may say so, made the mistake of invading Yemen and never recovered from that. And then other people had to come in, and lately Israelis have been fighting that war for the Saudis. Americans have also contributed to it now, particularly after Donald Trump's return. So Saudis are not about to go fighting anywhere. So they will not come to Pakistan's aid. Physically, Pakistan's only threat is India. So will the Saudis go to war with India in case another big terror attack takes place and India carries out retaliatory strikes in Pakistan? I would say theoretically, once the agreement is there, you cannot rule anything out, but I would say this is a near impossibility. So Pakistan only one threat. Who are Saudi Arabia's threats? Saudi Arabia has never been involved in a war with Israel through its entire history. I see a lot of excitement in Pakistan, on Pakistani media, in the Pakistani commentariat, also in the Pakistani establishment, that this has become some kind of an anti-Israel alliance. I would caution restraint. I will just give you a little chronology. And this is the chronology of what you might call as Arab-Israeli wars. 1948, Israel and the Palestinians and others joined in. 1956, the Suez crisis. 1967, the Six-Day War. 1973, the Yom Kippur War. And after that, many mini wars. And then some more than mini wars like Bekaa Valley Offensive, for example. Many Israeli offensives in Lebanon, in Syria. And finally, the warfare in Gaza, the pulverization of Gaza. In none of these has Saudi Arabia been involved. We have to analyze the present and gaze at the future by looking at history. Saudi Arabia has always made sure it is not at odds with Israel, and there is a very simple reason why. Because Saudi Arabia has been under America's protection, it's been an American ally all this while. All its forces, all its defense acquisitions are from the US. US is also a security guarantor for Saudi Arabia. Why at the same time it has now chosen to have the security guarantees for Pakistan is something that we can explore. All I'm trying to tell you is don't make the instinctive jump into the belief or into the rumors that this is a new alliance against Israel. So I see that analysis also, that the Middle East now has two nuclear alliances. One is US and Israel, and second is Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Quite to the contrary. I don't think Saudi Arabia is breaking away from the US. There is far too much in common there, far too much shared there. Saudi Arabia is now, Prince Mohammed bin Salman is modernizing his country. His country is transforming radically. He's also building these humongous new projects, including Neom City. For all of these, humongous amounts of global capital is needed, and also global buying power is needed. That buying power will include rich Indians as well. So there is no way he's breaking away from his Western alliance. He's playing a different game. And that game is about a rebalancing of power equations in the Middle East. Because within Middle East, there is a tussle for supremacy and power. And we have explained this to you many times. Because there are many countries in the Middle East, but there are about 4 or 5 countries with sizable populations. Egypt is one. Egypt is a civilizational state, as is Iran, as is Iraq. You could even say Turkey is a civilizational state. So these are 4 states of some size. And then there is Saudi Arabia, which in terms of population may not be of a comparable size, but in terms of the size of the economy, its alliances in the West, is a very powerful country. These countries, Egypt is more or less out of the power tussle in the Middle East now. Iraq, post Saddam Hussein, is now not a major player, but Iran, Turkey and Saudi Arabia always have a tussle amongst them. Now between Iran and Saudi Arabia, you might say there is the Shia-Sunni issue, that Iran sees itself as the leader of Shias, or the Shias of the world see Iran as their leader, whereas Saudi Arabia represents the Sunnis more strongly. With Turkey, that doesn't apply. Turkey is also a Sunni country. So Turkey also wants supremacy in the Islamic world, in the Middle East. And it's in that competition that Saudi Arabia also is trying to reposition itself. Saudi Arabia otherwise has no enemies to worry about. Can Iran and Iraq combine one day and create a Shia surge and threaten Saudi Arabia? I don't know. Because if that has to happen, if that were to happen, then Turkey will be the first country to get affected and act against it. So, in a way, Turkey may be a rival of Saudi Arabia, but it will then become a hedge for Saudi Arabia from Iran. Saudi Arabia lately has reached out to Iran as well. Now, which other enemies of Saudi Arabia can we find? Once again, Israel. Now, think about it. I also read analysis that it's because Israelis carried out these attacks in Doha that Saudis have now decided that American security guarantees are not good enough. That if the Americans could not protect Doha, the city of Doha, while they have such a huge central command presence there, their biggest airbase in the Middle East is in Qatar, and yet Israelis came and attacked these buildings housing Hamas leaders in Qatar. How could Saudi Arabia trust the Americans now from a likely attack from the Israelis? That's a little bit of a joke. Simply because if anybody believes that the Americans didn't know this attack was taking place in Doha, or that the Americans did not in some way let the Qataris know, but gave them plausible deniability, because it is not possible given the amount of equipment, the amount of sensors, radars, fighter aircraft, missiles that Qatar has, that such an attack can take place without Qatar knowing about this. So in the Middle East, it's also a case of some mile hue hai. Israeli planes that have been routinely going to Iran and attacking deep inside Iran, almost up to 2,000 kilometers away from Israel's air bases. They've been refueling on the way. They've been overflying Saudi and Jordanian territories. Even the Israeli aircraft that came and hit Doha either overflew Saudi airspace, or maybe they must have come hugging Saudi airspace over the Red Sea. See the geography of the region. There isn't much other option available. A fighter plane cannot fly through a tunnel underneath a big peninsular landmass. It cannot happen. So this is a geography where nobody's anybody's friend. Pardon me for using that example. Once again, easy enough to understand. Who do the Pakistanis worry about? But who do the Saudis worry about? We still haven't figured out. The only force they have fought with in the past many decades are the Houthis in Yemen. In 2015, they carried out an invasion, which we told you did not go right for them. Finally, other people had to help them. Even for their bombing missions, Americans had to help them with refueling, etc. The fact is, it was smarting under the Houthi Yemen experience that Saudis also set up an organization. It's a long name. It's Islamic Military Counter-Terrorism Coalition, IMCTC. And who did they choose to head it? They chose General Rahil Sharif, a rare Pakistani army chief who retired on due date, did not seek an extension. Obviously, he found something much more lucrative here. He took up this job in 2017. He's still holding that job. For 8 years, he's had that job. And yet, given the presence of this organization and the Pakistani general there, Israeli aircraft were still able to go over that airspace and hit Doha, and before that Iran at will. That reminds us once again that nothing in the Middle East is 2 plus 2 equals 4. And yet Houthis were able to hit back at them, also hit some important oil targets in Saudi Arabia, until the Israelis got involved in subduing the Houthis, also in drawing the Houthi fire upon themselves. And when the Houthis fire at Israel, I told you just now that Israeli aircraft have been overflying Jordan and Saudi Arabia to go and bomb Iran. Even when Houthis and the Iranians have been firing missiles at Israel, Saudi Arabians have also been intercepting those missiles and preventing those from hitting their targets in Israel. The excuse being, we have to defend our airspace. So this is all a very complicated situation. In the Middle East, however, the fears come from elsewhere. The American security guarantees are one thing. People have said this is America's Suez moment. I mentioned this to you earlier. What does the Suez moment mean? A Suez moment means when big powers, preeminent powers suddenly realize that their influence has died. And Suez moment refers to what happened in 1956 when Egypt decided to claim sovereignty over the Suez Canal. So the imperial British power and the French colonial power both were challenged. So that is a Suez moment when Britain and France, two preeminent powers, realized that they were not so powerful anymore. So this Saudi-Pakistan agreement also has been described like that by critics of America, that see now Americans are getting their comeuppance, their influence in the world is now waning, that it is genuinely becoming a multi-aligned, multipolar world. One new pole has emerged now, and now instead of trusting America as the overarching security guarantor, more and more regions in the world will seek a regional security guarantor. I don't think it's as complicated as that. It's actually much simpler. If you see the history of the Middle East, and you go back, say, about 50, 60 years and come right up to Arab Spring, in all of these cases, the regimes in the Middle East have only faced challenges. They've only been worried or shaken when they face challenges not from a foreign sovereign power, but from their own people, their own political groups, their own rival religious groups as well. And I can give you many, many examples. In many of these cases, when these challenges have come up, because these are non-democratic societies, the rulers are dictatorial, they are able to manage their sway on power because the countries have become so rich and they produce so much surplus cash because of oil, which in different ways they can distribute to their people to keep them loyal. Also, they use it to bring immigrants from outside and build new modern economies. UAE is a very good example of how that's been put into effect. UAE is a very good example of that. Qatar is a good example of that. Bahrain has become a very developed small country. Saudi Arabia also is heading in that direction, now modernizing as well. What these countries do not want, or what their regimes do not want, is any political challenge. That's why they were so shaken up by Arab Spring. Before that, I will give you a couple of examples. And what happened in each case, there is something common in those stories. In 1970, September 1970, Jordan, the king of Jordan, was shaken, challenged by a big uprising by Palestinians. That is called the Black September uprising. What happened then? King Hussein of Jordan, then the redoubtable King Hussein, was absolutely on the edge. Who saved his reign, his throne, and his life? It was the Pakistani army. Pakistani army then had a large contingent in Jordan for training. As training is just a euphemism. You are there because you are trusted more as an outside army, as an army from another country which does not have a political stake in your country. In that case, it was the 2nd Division of Pakistani Army, headed by who? But Major General Ziaul Haq. He carried out, Pakistani Army under him carried out an almighty massacre of Palestinians. History has recorded up to about 25 to 30,000 Palestinians massacred. This is September 1970. These Palestinian groups then broke up and they were exiled to different countries. Many of them went to Lebanon. They then carried out a series of terror attacks in different parts of the world, including the Munich Olympic massacre of Israeli athletes. That group was called the Black September Group. So what was the notable fact there? That the Pakistani army had become a security provider, a critical security provider to the regime of the day or to the royalty ruling Jordan when they faced a survival challenge. Then you come to 1979 November. That's when the siege of the Grand Mosque in Mecca takes place. Now this is a complicated story. I will not get into explaining that to you. Maybe one of these days, Praveen Swami is more up his street. Suffice it to say for now that ultra fundamentalist groups of a type who did not quite accept or respect the Saudi royalty or the status of the Saudi king as the custodian of the holy mosques. They took over the Grand Mosque in Mecca. The local security tried to fight their way in. They were shot down. Then a force was put together. The French sent 3 experts, anti-terror experts, because they were not Muslim. They could not operate in Mecca. They lived in a city close by, planned operations from there. Pakistani troops also got involved in that operation to clear out the mosques. So once again, what was the common factor? Pakistanis got involved. I will take you a year backwards from 1970 as well to 1969. Saudi Arabia's problems with Yemen did not start today. Yemen was always a very poor country. Saudi Arabia wasn't as rich as it is now. It was still rediscovering itself. Oil was discovering a new price, and real price was discovered only after 1973, the Yom Kippur War. But Saudi Arabia was still a nation of some consequence, had some money. Saudi Arabia did not really have a proper army or an air force. Saudi Arabia in 1967 had contracted to get a bunch of Pakistani officers, trainers, pilots on deputation. In fact, when Royal Saudi Air Force was founded in 1969 or thereabouts, its initial team of pilots was all on deputation from Pakistan Air Force. These Pakistan Air Force pilots flying Saudi Air Force planes carried out raids, attacks on southern Yemen, because southern Yemen was carrying out intrusions in Saudi Arabia. The Pakistani army also deployed at least 1 battalion on the Saudi-Yemen border to prevent further intrusions. This relationship has continued since then. Over time, it became richer, more profitable for Pakistan and Pakistan Army, profitable in many ways, institutionally for Pakistani Army, for Pakistan as a nation because they got paid for it, and also for many individuals in the Pakistani armed forces who got enriched because of this connection. After that, 1979 was a remarkable year. We tend to say, oh, 1984 was the most important year in history, or 1962 was the most important year in history. But think about 1979. 1979, when the seizure of the Grand Mosque took place, that is also the year that the Iranian Revolution took place. It's also the year that Soviets invaded Afghanistan. It is also when Zia had just taken over power after deposing Bhutto in Pakistan, and he was consolidating his power. Now, this had created such a mood of uncertainty and fear in Saudi Arabia that the Saudi king now wanted a large contingent of Pakistani troops. In Pakistan, obviously, Zia agreed to do that. He was very happy to do that. However, one hurdle arose because the Saudis told the Pakistanis, send us your army, send us your troops, and they were willing to take, or they were keen to take about 15,000 troops, but send us no Shias, send us only Sunnis. And Ziaul Haq said no. Ziaul Haq said in Pakistan army, they do not make a Shia-Sunni distinction. So that dragged on for some time. Ultimately, I'm sure some solution was found because at various points of time, up to 15,000 Pakistani soldiers, that is about 2 divisions worth of soldiers, were based in Saudi Arabia. That means that many people also underwritten, the costs underwritten by the Saudis. And now that the Saudis, particularly the Saudi royalty, had such a close shave, they decided that they had to get a more durable security arrangement. And that's why we saw in 1982 the Saudi-Pakistan Armed Forces Organization Agreement, whereby Pakistan were now to depute or post on deputation anything like 10 to 15,000 of their troops and officers in Saudi Arabia as on-ground security providers to the regime. Further on in 1990, as Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, once again the rich Arab countries all got very scared, and once again they would not fight to defend themselves, however good their aircraft might have been. They are not given to fighting. And then also they set up a multinational force. Basically, it was a force drawn from some Islamic nations, especially Pakistan, for the defense of Saudi Arabia. Defense of Saudi Arabia, not against the Americans, not against the Israelis, not against even the Iranians, but against a fellow Arab country, that is Saddam Hussein's Iraq. And that is also when large contingents of Pakistani forces landing up in Saudi Arabia, all paid for by the Saudis, of course. So this is a relationship that has gone on for a long time. After the 1998 nuclear test, the Saudi government hailed Pakistan for becoming the first Muslim nation with nuclear weapons. When the Fighting in Kargil had just started in May. Then Saudi Defense Minister visited Pakistan's nuclear installations with Nawaz Sharif, who was then Prime Minister, and A.Q. Khan, the father of the Pakistani nuclear bomb. So this is a very deep connection. Many commentators have noted these facts that look, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia have always had this connection. Pakistan has always been a military manpower provider to Saudi Arabia, whereas Saudi Arabia has been kind of ATM for the Pakistanis, ATM with an open check. They can pull out what money they need at various points of time. So this is also a transactional relationship. So why is this one causing any excitement? The reason this is causing some excitement now is one, that because it's come so close to what's happened between India and Pakistan. So this is something that India has to take note of immediately. Second, it's also come in because Saudis are now betraying some new insecurities which they had not had so far because they fully trusted the Americans. Or maybe the other conspiracy theory works, which is that Saudis maybe are preparing themselves also to sign the Abraham Accords at one point. And as they do that, they want to make it sound like they are coming at it from a position of strength. At some point of time, we will get closer to some kind of a two-state solution. It will not make everybody happy, but there might be some possibilities therein. And if that happens, then Americans and Israelis would both want the Saudis into the tent. And for the Saudis getting there, isn't it better to do it from a position of strength when you say, I have a nuclear weapons power also behind me, than going there just as a supplicant of the Americans? I'm just listing all the theories for you. This is just one of those. You can make your own choice in terms of what you think looks more plausible. Now, on the Indian side, this is a very important development because India also has a strategic partnership, a serious strategic partnership with Saudi Arabia, and India-Saudi relationship has improved enormously lately. The Prime Minister has made multiple visits to Saudi Arabia. It's a big seller. India is a big buyer of its energy. Saudis have invested a lot of money in India, so all those connections are there. So suddenly it looks like a shock. And also the shock is heightened by the fact that it comes on Prime Minister's birthday. I don't think anybody chose this deliberately, but it just acquires greater shock effect as a result of that. Now we have to also see what have the Gulf countries or Middle Eastern countries or the larger Islamic world has been doing in earlier India-Pakistan conflicts. Until 1971, nobody has come to fight on behalf of the Pakistanis except possibly, in fact most likely, a few Jordanian pilots with 10 F-104 Starfighter aircraft that the Jordanians loaned to the Pakistanis during the 1971 war, and looks like a couple of those were shot down, or maybe more than a couple of those were shot down. In fact, if you read Pushpinder Singh's and Ravi Rikhe's book, Fizaya, they quote from the official history of the Royal Jordanian Air Force Squadron, which had been seconded out to Pakistan Air Force in 1971, that they had brought in 10 F-104s, 6 of them went back. So there was some help. Beyond that, I don't find any reference, any evidence to anybody from any other country, any other Muslim country in this case, coming and fight for the Pakistanis. Shah of Iran in 71 gave Pakistan some equipment. Saudis, some of the others have always given Pakistan material help. In 1971, Henry Kissinger himself was asking Islamic countries and China to give Pakistan as much help as possible. But beyond that, this has not moved. So to think now that Saudis will somehow get involved directly or even indirectly in an India-Pakistan conflict in future is a bit of a stretch. What they might do at the same time is to give Pakistan more material aid. Will they transfer to Pakistan any of their missiles, mainly American missiles? We don't know what the user restrictions are from the Americans on those. So there will be limitations in those areas, and the Saudis will also know that they have a very deep, wide and long-term economic interest in India as well. So this is not as simple as it seems. That's the reason this called for an episode of Cut the Clutter.